Hey, if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time at all, you're going to know that I'm a bow hunter first and an archer second. That's why when my friends get a hold of me and say, I want to pick up a stick bow, or I get messages on social media, I always tell them the same thing. Don't ask me. I'm not the guy to ask. You need a coach. Well, not everybody has a coach available, right? You might not even have a local club where you can go and rub elbows and get tips from folks. But enter our friends over at The Push. Now, Matt and Tim have put together what they call the PAC, the Push Archery Center of Knowledge. What that is online courses to help you, whether you're brand new or you've been doing it for 35 years like me. There's something for everyone. Now I partake in Tom Clum's Solid Archery Mechanics, but they also have Roots by Rod Jenkins and Jimmy Blackman and Joel Turner's Controlled Process Shooting. Now, when you get one of these courses, you got it for life. They continually add content. You go on there, there's different modules to help you work on whatever you need, but there's also a forum that you jump on there and you can chat with other students, but also the coach themselves. So talk about having a coach at the tip of your fingers. The PAC has got it. So if you're interested in getting started or interested in getting better, run on over to www.thepusharchery.com/PAC. You're not going to be sorry, but you better get after it because season's coming soon. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Stick Bow Chronicles, brought to you by Blackwidow Bows. I'm flying solo, kind of in a rush, just walked in after work, and I got to knock this out, getting mauled by a dog. It's all good. We've got a big lineup, pretty stoked over the next month and a half. We got some great guests, and this week is no different. About a month ago, maybe a little more, I had Brian Koelzer on, and he was a great guest. Really enjoyed talking to him. But immediately I got messages, hey, you got to get his dad on, Scott. So this week we got Scott Koelzer, and just hit it off. Man, it was a good talking to him. We get to his bear hunting. He's killed a couple grizzlies and a polar bear. But we start off with Waylon Jennings. So the Stick Bow Chronicles never ceases to amaze those that think it's just about stick bows. I had to throw that in there. So we're pretty stoked. This is a great one, and we got a great lineup coming up. So this is a lot of fun. You know, this is the fun part of doing the podcast is actually podcasting and lining people up. The rest of it, it's not fun. Hey, Western States Rendezvous, Lolo, Montana, Memorial Day weekend. If you're there, look me up. There's a pile of people going to show up. Really looking forward to it. So if you're there, run me down. Say hi. Also, we got the I Hunt Close Trad Kill 2021 is in full swing. Big game animals you kill with a stick bow from January 1st to December 1st. Sorry, we're not going deep into December because we got to take 1 month off. Anyways, get them into ihuntcloseofficial@gmail.com. Look on our Instagram account for that email address or our Facebook account, but do not send them to my phone. Do not send them to the Stick Bow Chronicles Gmail account. Do not message me on Instagram with them. It goes to ihuntcloseofficial@gmail.com, and you'll get in. We got a pile of good stuff. I don't want to rattle them off because I don't have the whole list in front of me, but it's bigger and better than last year. We got a ton of cool stuff. Really looking forward to seeing those first trad kills too. We got a separate category for that, so send your photo in, send a short description in. Looking forward to seeing them. We had several hundred last year. It was really fun, really cool. Does, hogs. I mean, everything's awesome to shoot with a stick bow. So don't have to be great big bucks and great big bulls and whatnot. Just, we want to see them. We want to see your success photos. I think that's all I got. We're going to get out of here quick. I want to say big thanks to the sponsors, Selway Archery, Kifaru International, The Footed Shaft, Backwoods Grind Coffee Company. That is really good coffee if you hadn't tried it. Look them up. And Blackwidow Bows, of course. If you like the show, shop at those sponsors, or at least give those sponsors a shout out and say thanks for sponsoring the show. Tell your friends, give us a 5-star review, leave us a comment. If you don't like the show, ask for your money back. See how that goes. That's all I got. Hey, y'all have a great week. Roger out.
Putting a little snow down. But we'll take the moisture.
Oh my gosh, yes. A buddy was telling me he works for the Forest Service. They said that speaking specifically of Idaho, they were looking at possibly the driest year on record.
Oh wow.
Yeah. This year would not be the year to hold a non-resident, elk or deer tag, because there's no telling what's going to happen.
They're not going to grow the good antlers, have the nourishment, have the anything.
Or shut the woods down, possibly.
Well, the one part I look at it, that I've had talk with several people about fires, and I go, they just look at the fire season. I go, well, if we don't have moisture right now, it's not going to grow the kindling. It's not going to grow the grass, all the bad stuff for fires. Yeah,
that low flash stuff. But some of the places up here in North Idaho are, nipple deep in deadfall. So
right.
It's got a lot of fuel on the ground.
Yeah, we've got to hope for a wetter spring, because it's other than that, it's just going to be scary for everything all over. Okay.
And is it Koelzer or Koelzer?
Koelzer,
that's right. I think Brian had to help me out when I had him on.
Yeah, you've done a few of these with Brian, right?
I did one with him, and we pretty much hit it off. I'm looking forward to meeting him over there in Lolo. You gonna be over there, the Western States?
I'm gonna try to make it over there. What days are that again?
Gosh dang, heck, I don't know.
It's this coming weekend.
Is it this one or the next one?
I thought not this one.
Yeah.
The next one.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, my antler hunting on this ranch just got put off, but we're going to try to do it next Friday because the weather's supposed to be better. I was supposed to go tomorrow and Saturday, but this friend, we're going to try to put it off till next Friday. But then, because I told him about this gathering over at Lolo, and he might try to make it, but I'm going to try to get over there for at least one day.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, maybe I can.
And Brian, pardon?
Oh, maybe we can meet. Shake your hand.
Yeah. No, Brian mentioned you were going to be there. So.
Oh, yeah. I mistakenly taught him. I mistakenly told him after a few beers, I'm a pretty good Waylon Jennings singer. And he told me they had a band. So.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you're pretty good. Can you do Waylon? When just like him?
Oh, yeah. After a few beers.
After a few. Oh, I see.
In my head, it sounds good.
He's my all-time favorite country singer.
Oh yeah, I'll have to agree with you there. Yeah, that's good stuff.
I mean, just the voice he had and whatnot, and especially the crowd he got to run with, the highwaymen. Think of the times they had.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah,
that was a great group of singers too. I mean, it wasn't just their voices, but it was the content was just great.
Yeah, singers, songwriters, everything about them. And the way they just had fun.
Oh, man.
I mean, it was like the Rat Pack. The same thing as the Rat Pack. We're about that era, too.
Yeah.
And, we don't have any entertainers like that today. I mean, the country has Garth Brooks and a few things like that. But you take music like the Rat Pack, the Sinatras, the Sammy Davises, and all that. There's none of that.
No. And, It was the redneck version of the Rat Pack, and I kind of relate to the rednecks.
Right.
Yeah, they're my people.
But they had a pretty wild. I mean, I think they consume more booze than I'll ever dream about in my lifetime.
Yeah, no, I'm okay to keep it that way myself.
Yeah, exactly.
I had my glory days. I'm done.
Yeah, well, with me being 70 years old, they're way behind me too.
Well, cool, man. Yeah. So Scott Koelzer, where are you at in Montana?
I live in Three Forks, which is just between Bozeman and Butte. I'm at Three Forks is the headwaters of the Gallatin, Madison, and Jefferson rivers, where Lewis and Clark came through.
Oh, man. I just did a little trip myself for 4 or 5 days by myself, and I had the audio book, Undaunted Courage, with all about the Lewis and Clark expedition. And, man, it's just, gosh, just to think back what that must have been like.
I was just talking with a friend about it 2 days ago, and those were men back there, not the bunch of wimps we have today. I mean, you figure they pulled their canoe like all the way from the East Coast to the West Coast. And this person was talking, he's read a lot of the Lewis and Clark books, and they figure the men ate 7 pounds of meat a day a person.
Yep.
That's a lot of meat.
I'd go one step further and say even the toughest that we have today are probably just barely make the cut in those days. Can you imagine the mental state you'd have to be in when you start down there out of Missouri and you start pulling? You're like,
you're going to be alone for 2 years.
Yeah.
And when you go through places, most people are going to want to kill you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're an enemy. And then, the pop guns, of course, they didn't know about the bears, or, they had to know some things. As this friend and I were talking, they were, there had been trappers coming out in this part of the world well before 1804. So they had to have a pretty good idea of what to expect. But, for animals and even the lay of the country. But still, to see it firsthand the way they did it, wow! And this friend talked about their first encounter with grizzly bears when 4 or 5 of them shot the grizzly bear, then the grizzly bear chased them into the water, and I think Clark looked at him and said, "No more shooting grizzly bears. Bad idea."
I mean, you could do it. We could talk about this for hours. They're young guys. I mean, they were in their early 30s. And the way that they went through and picked, see, I had read the journals of Lewis and Clark, but I had never gone through Undaunted Courage. And that, that guy, when he does this, he does some research on it, and they're matching up diaries from different other participants in the Corps of Discovery. The way that they chose, I mean, they handpicked and weeded out and had a group of guys that, they did this in 3 years, and they lost one person they figured appendicitis or something.
Right.
Being a mason and working in the outdoors your whole life, you know what that does to your hands. Can you imagine pulling on wet ropes for years?
For 3 years with not the salve, the balm, and the everything that we have to take care of our hands when they start to crack and yada, yada, yada. Although they probably used a lot of wild animal fat and oils and whatnot. They were up to snuff on that stuff. They had all their home remedies back then, but still. So, walking, how many people would you look at today and say, walk from St. Louis to Seattle and then back? And then, I just drove over the divide. I went to Walla Walla, Washington. And when you go up over the divide through all that country that you live in, and the underbrush is as mother-loving thick as it is, that wouldn't have been very much fun.
There was 2 things that stuck out in my mind when I listened to this, and I'm going to go back and listen to it again. I mean, it's just fascinating. But 2 things that I never knew that really jumped out at me. And one was when they got over the divide and they were meeting with, I might mess it up, but the Nez Perce. And they needed horses bad. They knew that Sacagawea, that was her people. So she speaks the language. But they left her and went ahead without her. So they left her in camp and tried to make contact, which even the author of the Undaunted Courage was like, that is one of the biggest mysteries of this whole trip is why would you not take the person that speaks the language Why wouldn't you take her? And plus, it's a woman, so it shows it was, no aggression because you have a woman in your party. That was fascinating.
Really, I had never thought about that, but you're right. That kind of makes you wonder a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. But this is not a book review.
Right.
I did a podcast with your son Brian and had a blast. And immediately that week when it released, I had several people contact me and said, "Man, Brian's awesome. You got to get his dad on." So I really appreciate you agreeing to jump on here and shoot the breeze.
Okay, good. Well, hopefully I can provide a little insight to the good old days.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, I think you can shoot the breeze.
Yes.
So you grew up right there in Montana?
Yes, I was born and raised in Bozeman, just 30 miles down the road. And it's now turned into a big liberal city, and I don't go there very often anymore. I live in just a town of 2,000 people, and I like small towns.
Yeah. I hear you. My little small town here has changed drastically. Yeah. But
Here's your little small town.
Oh gosh, I don't know. The sign says 5,000 people. It's pretty spread out, but I think that sign needs updated because I see a lot of out of state plates anymore.
Right.
Becoming in-state plates.
Yep. Same thing here.
Yeah, and you got your ear to the ground on construction, I'm sure, and that's just insane over here.
No, yeah. Well, that's the same with us. We're beyond busy. Nobody can hire anybody. I mean, like the town of Bozeman, I think has 700 to 1,000 job openings, and you can't. It's impossible to hire anybody or find somebody to work. And with all the technology thing, most people don't want to work anymore. They want to work with their thumbs or work from home and not do manual labor like we do.
That's funny you mentioned that. I went to a trade school rather than high school. And I took plumbing, so I was close to getting my license as I graduated. And back then, I mean, everybody was supposed to go to college, so you're kind of looked down upon. It's kind of sweet justice now to see the tradesmen being lifted up and being such an important job and making good money now.
Yep, especially with the way people are moving in here, it's pretty vital.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I was just talking with a friend, and Montana gained a congressional seat with his last census. California lost a seat, and Montana gained a seat. So you can kind of figure out where they came to.
Well, I got news for you. There's several of them stopping here in Idaho. They don't make it across the border.
They didn't make it all the way over the mountains.
No. If they need gas money, I'll get them some gas money.
Yeah, well, it's actually getting so expensive here. We're hearing that South Dakota, they're just is where a ton of them are moving right now because property is just a heck of a lot cheaper and yada yada.
Yeah,
we keep trying to send them east.
I was up in the hills yesterday screwing around and I was talking to a friend of mine back east. And I said, I come up around the corner and you know what it's like cutting firewood in the national forest. You're not supposed to block a road. You got a tree in the road and somebody drives up and you're like, man. So I pull up and there's an old diesel truck pulling a big horse trailer and they're loading firewood in it. And I said, to the untrained eye, it looks like the Deliverance. But the minute I see these people, I'm like, yep, that's my people. You just walk up, hey, what's going on, guys? And I love the rednecks. I relate.
You step out and start playing your banjo with them, huh?
Yeah, damn Skippy. Of course, I can't play.
You just sing like Waylon.
Yeah, I sing like Waylon. I'm sure of it. In my head, I am sure of it.
There you go.
So, what was your catalyst? Did you grow up hunting?
We moved out of town. I was born in the city, and when I was 6 years old, 5 or 6 years old, my folks moved out in the country 3 miles out. And when I was 7 years old, I started trapping, and I trapped cottontails and weasels. And I just spent all my time in the rolling hills behind our house or in the summer we had 3 creeks down below our house and full of brook trout. And I was just down there catching brook trout all the time. And we ate really a lot of fish back then. And then once I trapped weasels and rabbits first. And then when I got to be about 10 years old, I started trapping mink and muskrats. And mink and muskrats back then mink were worth more then than they are now. So I'd like to get $18 for a male mink.
Wow.
And I mean, I was the richest little kid at grade school with catching these things and whatnot. So I just started spending a lot of time outdoors. I lived there every chance I could get. And my dad bought us some old fiberglass bows. And then when we got towards 13, 14, we got Bear Kodiak bows, Bear Super Kodiak bows, Bear Kodiak Magnums, and started shooting recurves and just been kind of hooked with that ever since. And through the early years, I mean, I in high school, I was behind the house in the Second Valley, and I think I was a junior in high school, and I had a bear come running down the valley, and I shot it, and I hit it good. It ran down the valley. I'm just happier than a clam. I go down there, I get the bear, I can pick it up under one arm and carry it out. It was a good toilet seat cover. Pardon?
You had to be one of the. I mean, there couldn't be a lot of people slinging arrows then. So if you kill a bear you kill a bear there, you had to be a little bit of a hero status.
Well, to me it was just neat.
Oh yeah.
Because I didn't run with a lot of friends that bow hunted back then. It was kind of me, my older brother, and I did it. And the younger brothers they were too young, but they were picking up bows and started to do things. See, our father rifle hunted. Our father was a fisherman. Fishing is what he really loved. And, but he got bows for us since we were in the country, and, thought we were less dangerous walking around with bows than with us walking around with rifles. So I think that's why he got them for us. And, we just, the Tom bow hunted quite a bit, not as much as I did. But, in the early years, I was into sports. So that cuts a lot of time out there. You're able to bow hunt for big game and whatnot, but just bow hunted around, through high school. I mean, in high school, I shot the bear. That was it. And then I got to college and shot a couple of deer. And then I got out of college. That was really all I'd shot until then. But then I just really, I think my first year out of college, shot a deer and elk with a rifle and then that was it. I didn't shoot anything with a rifle until I shot a cow elk this last November 25th to have some meat for the freezer. That was the first animal I'd shot. Well, that was the second animal I'd shot with a rifle since 1973.
Wow. So when you talk about shooting the bear, when you talk about shooting the bear, are we talking the late 60s, early 70s?
That was about 68, 67, 68.
What did your dad do for work?
My dad was a manager of a business called Pacific Tide and Fur, which had sold new steel, bought scrap iron, bought hides, sold fence posts to ranchers, baling twine, bought batteries, a recycling, and a new steel place.
He was
a manager of that. And then in 1961, he with two other guys opened up a sporting goods store, the second sporting goods store in Bozeman. And 2 years later, he quit Pacific and went down there and became the manager of that. So my dad ran a sporting goods store.
Right here in Sandpoint, Pacific Hide and Steel is still here.
Okay. Well, there were back when, my grandfather was one of the co-founders of it.
Oh, No kidding.
And at one time, there were 26 branches of Pacific, and uncles or relatives were managers of 13 of the 26.
I'll be damned. Yep. It's still,
And now there's none.
yeah, it's still here today.
Yep. Well, that's just hell. It's a heck of a booming business. All the new steel. Hides aren't a business thing, part of it anymore, or whatnot. But the farmers and ranchers have still got to be taken care of,
Yep.
and the construction people.
Yep, for sure. So you guys are shooting bear bows. Your dad owned a sporting goods store or was managing a sporting goods store. I'm assuming you guys are shooting bear arrows and bear razor heads.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bear wood arrows, and the bear razors, the bear heads with the inserts in them and whatnot. And that went on until into college. And when I got into college, there was a gentleman, you may have heard of him, Bob Savage.
Yeah, I think I met him.
Savage Deathmaster.
Yeah.
He was one of the first really good recurve builders, and he was a trapper and a real outdoorsman, and he kind of became my mentor on a lot of things. He helped me out in trapping to catch my first wolverines, the coyote, stuff like this. But Bob also made a Savage Deathmaster, and I bought one of those from him. I bought one and then bought another one. My first one was a 61-inch, 57-pound. Then I stepped up to a 57-inch, 68-pound. And then a guy I didn't meet in college. I played basketball at Montana State, and Paul Schafer played football at Montana State, and he was 3 years ahead of me. I didn't know him then, but just after Paul got out, I met Paul through Bob, and Paul got into building bows, and he learned how to build them from Bob, and then Paul developed his own bow, the Schafer Silver Tip. And then after some years, Paul and I became pretty good friends. We hunted together, and I started shooting his bow, and that's what I still shoot today. And the bow I have is half original his. His riser was made by Paul and whatnot. But back in the day, I shot a 72-pound bow. Now that I'm old and the muscles are going south, I had to have Dave Windauer build me a 55-pound set of limbs, and that's what I'm shooting today. So half is Paul, half is Dave.
Sure. I got a buddy that was friends with Paul, and he has several of his risers still and several sets of original, limbs, but limb design has gotten so much more efficient. 55 pounds is still pretty dang quick compared to an older 70-pound, 72-pound.
Well, especially with today's arrows.
Oh yeah,
back when I got, I'd always shot wood arrows, but back when I got into Paul or Bob Savage's bows, I started shooting aluminum, and shot 21-17s back then, and up to 22-16s, and that's what I shot pretty much. And I got towards the end, when I was still shooting 72 near the end, I started shooting a lot more wood arrows, and not just the aluminum anymore. But then now that I dropped down to a 55-pound bow, I've started shooting some of the carbons and whatnot, and full metal jacket arrows, and they're just so much faster than the aluminums. It's unreal.
Yeah.
So the 55-pound bow still shoots very, very flat, and very comfortable with it.
Backing up a little bit, I think I met Bob Savage through Steve Schindler. Would that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. I think I met him a few years ago over in Libby, Montana at a shoot.
Very, very well could, because if a traditional shoot,
oh yeah,
Bob would have been at it, because Bob is a member also of the Traditional Bowhunters of Montana. That's pretty much when I get to see Bob most of the time anymore, is at their January meeting over at Chico and whatnot. So if it being a traditional shoot, Bob could have been there very, highly, yes.
Yeah, and that Chico gathering every year, I think, man, I should go because I got to tell you, doing this podcast, I get the good fortune to talk to people all across the country, and it always to me, Michigan, Minnesota, that country right there, Wisconsin, they're always like the hotbed, or seem to be historically the hotbed of what we love, that historical traditional archery, but Montana has such a rich history of quality, I don't want to say famous, but just, icons of what we do.
Right. Well, kind of for the history of Montana, in 1961, the Fish and Game forgot archery season. I mean, forgot it. Didn't have it in their books or in their regulation books or anything like that. And it was after that, some years after that, Bob Savage was one of the main instigators. Bob is an unbelievable letter writer. And he has every letter he ever wrote still to this day.
Oh man.
And he started communicating with some people, and Gene and Barry Wenzel back in that time period moved to Montana. This is not right 61. This is later in the 60s. They moved to Montana and whatnot. And we had pretty limited seasons back then. Well, these guys started communicating, and back then mostly by letters. And those gentlemen formed the Montana Bowhunters Association in 1973.
Wow.
And Bob was the president, Gene was the secretary treasurer, Jerry Karski was the vice president. Jerry was from up in the Kalispell area also. Then he ended up in Bozeman having a painting business. But, those guys got together, and it's all started through basically guys that really cared about bow hunting, and all the original founders were traditional shooters.
Well, you weren't very far. You weren't very far removed at that point from traditional bows, regardless, right? I mean, that was early enough. There wasn't a lot of compound in the world, was there?
There were quite a few compounds.
Was there?
Because there was a guy named Ron Graneman who was just a really good guy. He had the Archer's Den in Great Falls, and he was a compound shooter. And he was friends with Paul Schafer. In fact, I hunted with Paul and Ron on an elk hunt one time. But Ron had the Archer's Den then, and I showed up. It was a total compound place, and I showed up there with one of Bob's bows. But I had the first probably fiberglass arrows in the state of Montana ever brought in here. I think they were lambda-glass arrows. I had heard about them and I bought them, and I took them down, and he had this chronograph, and I said, "How do you work this thing?" And he tells me, so I measure the arrow, I pull back my 68-pound recurve, and I shoot an arrow through it, and I think it was like 215 feet of, which all of a sudden Graneman's going, "What the hell have you got going there?" Because recurves didn't shoot an arrow that fast back then. But because he had the compounds, the Shepley, the PSE compounds and whatnot. Well, but there were quite a few of them. That was like 74, 75.
Well, to be fair, legend has it you're 6'8", so I can't imagine the power stroke you have. So I'm not sure that's a normal measurement.
Well, I mean, but you measure the arrow to do whatever. But I don't have that long a draw.
Oh, really?
For my size. I've tried to break it, but I'd shoot with Paul. I worked for Paul one summer on his ranch. Paul had a wheat ranch, and we just do a lot of shooting and a lot of long distance shooting. And but Paul shot a 94-pound bow. Paul would pull that bow back and hold it for forever and finally release.
Really?
When I draw, when my thumb touches my mouth, I release. I snap shoot.
Yeah.
And I've tried to get it to where I, pull back and hold a second. But if I pull back and hold for a billionth of a second, instead of seeing the spot I'm aiming at, I see the whole animal and all the horizons and everything else. And I can't hit my ass with both hands if I pull back and hold for a second. So I always snap shoot. So I mean, I have a 30-inch draw.
Oh, you must.
So I don't have a super long draw.
I was going to say, you mentioned earlier about I think you said like a 57-inch bow or 56-inch bow. And I was going to lead into this at some point, but I'm thinking, man, you had to double that thing into a U.
Well, Paul's bows were super smooth. The same with Bob's bows were super smooth, and that's where Paul learned from him. And Paul's bows were smooth. So of course, back then I'm younger. They didn't stack. Some of the bear bows I had back then and whatnot, you'd get them back to about 24 inches, and it was easier than heck. But the last 4 to 6 inches, it was like trying to pick haystack up. All of a sudden, it just like stopped. The last 6 inches were work.
Yeah.
And Bob's and Paul's bows were not like that. They're smooth all the way through. But I don't shoot those anymore. I mean, I now shoot the bow I had from Ball was a 60-inch bow. And when I got the 55-pound limbs made by Dave, I had to do those at 62.
Dave does a great job, and we're pretty fortunate that he picked up the torch the way he did and continued the Schafer line on. We're pretty fortunate. He does a great job.
Well, he actually makes a better bow than Paul did. I mean, Paul would kind of get them shootable, and then that was good enough. Let's go hunting. And Dave is more of a craftsman and finishes them all the way. And I mean, he just makes a beautiful bow.
Yeah, he does. He does.
Yeah.
They're always over at the Libby shoot, the whole clan, every year. It's pretty cool to see.
Just very, very nice people.
Yeah, I have a friend named Rich Yort, and he was one of the guys he's the guy that has all the silver tip or Schafer risers and limbs, and he tells stories about Paul, them drinking in some bar and going out making some incredible shot on a I can say it now, but on a street sign, for beers. Yeah.
Yep, that would be Paul. Well, if you're ever up to Libby, and I don't know if it's still there, I haven't been there in years. Just outside of Libby is a taxidermy studio, and Paul had just taken an animal there and was coming out, and some other guys came in, and Paul had I can't remember if it was Grizzly or one of his sheep, and they're just talking, and two guys come in and they're giving him a hard time, and they're going, "You didn't kill that with a bow. You can't hit stuff with a bow, yada, yada, yada." And Paul was always very quiet and humble, not a loud, boisterous person or anything. And, Paul's leaving, they get out the cars, and these guys are harassing him a little bit about he can't hit something like that. And he's like 70, 80 yards away from the building where his vehicle was parked. Paul just knocks an arrow, and they have sheep and deer and elk silhouettes up in this building. And Paul just pulled back and shot and just center punched this sheep. I think it was a sheep right behind the shoulder, and just kind of quieted the guys going, "Yep, I can."
Well, that's how the story went. My buddy said it was 70 yards. It was a specific letter. And I guess it wasn't like he didn't do it just once. It was kind of a trick of his to, get the bar to buy him beers, and he'd walk out in the parking lot and they'd pick that a certain letter out on the sign, and Rich said it was 70 yards, and he'd drill it, and then everybody had to buy him beers.
And Paul liked his beer. I drank a little bit of that with him and some other stuff. So Paul had one story, and I don't know if you ever heard it, where they're walking back to the rig, and Paul had set a camera out there, and somebody bet Paul he couldn't hit the camera, and he killed it. I mean, a hell of a thing to do to a few $100 camera. You kind of wish you'd miss on something like that, but he was just, I stopped at his house on 495 South Mini Lakes Drive in Kalispell one time, and Paul shot a lot of arrows, and this deer silhouette is set up like 50, 60 yards from his house. and there's this group of arrows just right in the chest, like 50 arrows in this group. And I went, "Where have you been shooting from?" And he goes, "The porch on my house." So 60 yards, he was that kind of shot.
I mean, today you see somebody shoot like that today, and they're going to be a gap shooter, among other things, right? I'm assuming he was just instinctive, right? Am I right?
Just totally instinctive.
Yeah. Wow.
And, because like I said, I worked with him that month, and we did a lot of shooting, and, we'd be shooting well up to 100 yards. And, if you practice it, you get better at it, you get this and that. But I mean, to explain Paul's instinctiveness, when I was on a hunt with him in 77, we're snowed in at this spike camp we went out to. And Paul had bought a survival rifle for his airplane. He was buying this hunting area. And I was actually going to move up there with my family and run it for him. It was what the plan was. This was in the Yukon. But he bought a 30-30 rifle to have in his airplane in case the airplane went down and he needed to survive and get out. And he'd never shot it. We're in camp, and he says, finally gets the rifle out. He's checking it out. He says, "Scott, grab that Del Monte pecan and walk out there 20, 30 yards and throw it up in the air." And I go, "You egotistical little monster. Yeah, you can't hit that and whatnot." He says, "Go out and do it." So I walk out there 20, 30 yards away from him, and I throw this little Del Monte pecan up in the air. He drills it.
No kidding.
And I tell him what a lucky little devil he is. And he said, "Throw it up there again." I throw it up there again, and he drills it again. So much for luck. And I'm talking to him about it. I said, "Where'd you learn to shoot a gun like that?" And he said, "When I was a kid out on the farm, they lived in wheatland, on the bootlegger trail in wheat country. That's what his dad did." He says, every day, he says, "I'd take the single shot 22 rifle out pheasant hunting, and I'd bring back a bunch of pheasants."
Wow.
And he would not shoot them on the ground. He'd shoot them flying with a 22 rifle.
Holy smokes.
So he had just, from an early age, had built hand-eye coordination.
Yeah.
Which I think is just a lot of shooting instinctively.
Wow. That you talk about throwing that pecan up. That reminds me of you. I'm sure you've seen the videos of the Fred Bear videos when Ed Bilderback is shooting off the back of the boat. They're throwing bottles up in the air. Remember that?
No, I haven't seen that.
Oh, that's a classic. Same thing.
But the same thing, shooting things, just throwing them out like that.
Yeah, man. Gifted. Some people are just flat gifted. So, Montana, I'm assuming elk is high on your list growing up bow hunting in Montana.
Yes. I mean, starting out and spending a lot of time, that was, we had good mule deer back then. And so I liked mule deer a little bit. But we had mule deer right around our house and things like that. But once I got, in 73, when I got done with college and started hunting, elk moved to the top of the list because they're just so fun with their bugling and where you're at hunting them and whatnot. So very, very much so. It took me a while to figure it out. My first couple elk were cows, but it was kind of, I started out, Gene Winslow wrote a story on me. I had a good year in 77, and it talked about how I bow hunted for 5 years and didn't shoot anything because I kept trying to look for trophy animals, bigger animals. And so I came home without anything all the time for 5 years. So then I lowered my standards and, got my feet wet, and that helped to get started on things.
Well,
but we just had some really tremendous elk hunting spots back then. And, one of my favorite places to hunt was up around West Yellowstone, adjacent to Yellowstone National Park. And that was before they introduced wolves.
Oh, yeah.
And we had 30,000 elk in the park. And, they'd migrate out. And I hunted near the park to where they'd migrate out and get in there. We had some really incredible elk hunting that now is horrible because last year's spring elk count was 3,300. So
Yeah.
They've lost 90% of their elk in Yellowstone.
Would that be around Gardner?
No, this was around West Yellowstone.
Oh, gotcha. So your first 5 years, you're holding out for trophy animals. Was that in part due to the guys you hung around with and you looked up to, and you just wanted to be, that crowd?
No, it just, I guess, in life, I've always set my sights on doing the best that you can do and busting your butt and just, going for the gusto, I just set my sights high.
Yeah.
And, part of this was, part of those years were in the college years. And, one of my favorite stories in college, I told you my dad had a sporting goods store. Now, I killed a 3-point mule deer in college. I'd shot the bear in high school. I had a 3-point mule deer. I drew a Shiras moose tag, which are hard to draw. And my dad, in his sporting goods store, had the world record Shiras moose with a bow, just the horns mounted. It was shot by a gentleman named Keith Wheat. And I think it scored 156 or 157, something like that. Well, the horns were up there, and I didn't know a thing about scoring then or anything. Just you'd look at them and go by size. And I had this moose tag, and, I know what the world record looks like, and I get just right outside of Bozeman, and it's a snowy morning in September, and I get in on these 3 bull moose, and one of them's a pretty nice moose, and I'm 20 yards away. And I'm looking at this moose, and I'm looking at it, and I'm going, God, is it a world's record? Oh, I'm not sure. Maybe it is. Oh, no, maybe it's not quite as big as Keith, so it might be number 2 and whatnot. I couldn't decide that it was big enough. And this is, once again, I don't know how to score a moose then. I'm just looking at horn size. I go, I don't know if it's bigger than Keith. So I took a snowball and threw it at it and chased it away. I still, to this day, have never shot a Shiras moose that big. And, but I mean, here I am. I've shot a bear the size of a toilet seat cover and a 3-point mule deer. And for some reason, I'm going, it might only be number 2 in the world. I better pass on that one.
That's a good
So I wasn't the brightest bulb in the pack back then. I mean, I had some pretty major, I don't regret them.
Yeah.
But I just had my sights set, and it's not about killing it. It's about doing it the way you want to do it.
Man, you couldn't have said it any better. It is so much of it, and everybody's different. But for me, I'm the same way. It's about the method. I mean, it's about how it's done, and it's not. I'm not down on anybody for thinking differently. That's just me. It's how it's done.
It's totally how it's done. Well, that's why we hunt traditional.
Yeah.
It's as I just tell people, I like shooting things at 10, 20 yards. I mean, what I've been very fortunate hunting bears, and I've got some pretty nice bears, and people ask me how close I was to them, and I tell them, and they just go, "Oh my God!" I'm going, that's why I hunt with the bow I hunt with and everything. I don't want to do it at long ranges. I want to do it closer. And actually, the older I've got, the closer I want to get. Back in the day when I hunted with Paul and did more practicing and was more competent, I stepped out there on some distances and killed some critters at it. Generally, it was after I missed the first close shot that I'd shoot them at a longer range. But I don't do that anymore. I mean, I want to, my last 2 grizzlies were at 10 and 11 yards, things like that. I mean, that's what's fun about the bows we use, and that's why I do it.
Yeah. But where were the grizzlies? Canada, Yukon, Alaska?
Well, my first grizzly was actually with that hunt in 77 with Paul. That area Paul was in the process of buying, had put money down, was fixing up the area. I shot that with Paul. Paul was 200 yards behind me with his bow, and that was my backup. And that was my first grizzly in '77, and then I got my second grizzly was in 9/11, 2001.
Oh, wow.
I had an outfitter friend who lived in Bozeman, but had an outfitting business in British Columbia. And when 9/11 hit, he called me up, and I was working, and he just said, "Scott, I know you want a big bear. I've got incredible bears here. I'm looking at two right now." He called me on a sat phone, and he said, "If you want to come up, and we'll go book a goat hunt, and we'll go bear hunting. And if you get a bear, if you get a bear, it'll cost you 5,000. If you don't get a bear, it'll cost you nothing." And so I got off work and I drove up there. Nobody could fly then. They shut the airlines down. That's why he had no hunters. All his hunters couldn't get there. And I got up there and shot that bear with him in British Columbia. And then the day after I shot my bear, taking care of my bear, the next day we saw an absolute giant bear. And I mean, just giant. And I wanted to come back for that. So 2005, I went back to hunt that big bear, and they had seen it. The hunter before had seen it. And this is an old blueberry patch, a 40,000 acre burn. And old burns like that, the first thing that grows is blueberries, and the bears move in. And we got there, and they had seen that bear 2-3 days earlier, and got in there that night, and we had 28 inches of snow fall on us that night and covered up the blueberry patch, and most of the bears left, but a few of the smaller, younger ones. And on the last day, I harvested one of them, and that was at 10 yards.
Wow. You get in that tight. What level of apprehension is there for you?
There's actually none. And I've talked with some different people that went up and booked and hunted grizzlies with Brian after that. I guess with me, when you're sneaking in on the animal, when you're doing all of this, I don't get excited. I don't, and you shouldn't get excited. You get excited, you get whatnot, you screw up, you don't make a good shot. So when you're sneaking on the animal and getting into it and all that, to me, I guess it's like no different than stalking a mule deer or an elk or something like that. But after you let the arrow go and you hit the animal, then you get your cardiovascular system cleaned out, because that's pretty exciting. When I shot the bear on 9/11 in 2001, when I shot the bear, it was actually 1.5 yards away from my outfitter. Going to him. It had turned and going to him. He didn't know the outfitter was there. He knew I was there because the bear was coming up the hill, and we had seen the bear from several miles away. It would take us 4 hours to get up there and get around through the jungles. And then the bear went down to the creek bottom, was coming back up the hill. The bear walked into us. Brian had the bear coming. He's leaned up against a tree, and the bear walked over right by him. And I was going towards Brian when the bear saw me move. So the bear was facing me straight on, and it just looked at me. And finally, the wind was blowing from Brian to the bear, but finally the bear turned to start going towards Brian, and it turned, so I had a shot through both lungs, and that's when I drew and shot. But after the arrow hit it, then it turned and came by me at 4 or 5 yards. And when you have a bear turn and come by and go by at that, it's not exciting, like, you lose control, but it gets your heart beating.
Well, it happens pretty fast. I don't think people realize they haven't seen it, man. When when they go to move, man, it's fast.
Oh, they are. They can hit 25 miles an hour in just a few steps.
Yeah.
And then when I got the bear, when I shot that smaller bear in 2005, it was in this blueberry patch. And once again, I had hit some deadfall to where I didn't get around good. So I was like 30, 35 yards from the bear, but all of a sudden the bear was just feeding, and it came up towards us. And my guide, Dawson, had he'd actually left his rifle up in the hill, and he just had his camera, and he was down behind me, and the bear started moving into us, and the bear got to 10 yards and all of a sudden realized I was there. I wasn't moving or anything, but the bear just realized I was there. And all of a sudden the bear kind of turned and huffed up, and Dawson said later, he says, I thought that's when he was charging, but he didn't. But when he huffed up and turned broadside like that, I was able to, a well-placed arrow, and he was down in 30 yards and whatnot. But, you know, once again, just like even when he got huffed up and all that, you're just concentrating on the shot, and things are normal. But once again, after you make the shot, like I said, your blood flows freely.
Yeah, it does.
So grizzlies are bears are my favorite thing to hunt, especially grizzlies. But now in British Columbia, the new prime minister shut it down some years ago, so there's no grizzly hunting there at all.
No, hopefully, yeah. Well, hopefully it can come back. I talked to some of those guys up there, and they feel like they get a new political party in there, and they might be able to get it straightened out.
I think they will, totally. Hopefully, because the bears are eating those people out of house and home. They're eating all of the moose and everything like that. Their moose herds are taking a heck of a hit by all the bears.
I had a biologist on from Idaho last, I don't know, 6-8 months ago. And we were talking about the grizzlies up here in the Selkirks and Cabinets, and specifically the Cabinets, how one of them went on, it was a collared bear, and it went on this incredible trek down to the Selway and then turn around and come back. And, my question was, why do you think that we're seeing an influx of this? Because it's not it's not an isolated case. And without hesitation, he said, well, they're just expanding their territory. I mean, people think because you don't see one, or, they're not seeing them often, that, they're still endangered, but they just take up, they take up so much room, I mean, they don't have it's not like a whitetail like lives within a mile of its birthplace. I mean, they take up a lot of country. So, you're not going to see hundreds and hundreds of bears, but they are expanding.
Oh, by far, where I hunt down near West Yellowstone, where I'm at clear to Three Forks, we have the Gravelly Mountain Range, we have the Tobaccorots. We never used to have bears there. We've got bears in all of them. Now, the Fish and Game, against the rules, have the Forest Service against the rules have actually flown them in and planted them in these places. But
Really?
We went from 25 years ago, they thought they had 300 bears in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. They're now well over 1,000. But they're totally protected. Nothing nothing can be done against them unless it's a problem bear. But we just had last fall and this spring, we had 2 grizzly sightings a mile outside the town of Bozeman. So the bears are, and we're having drainages up by west where we hardly ever used to see. The bears were around. You'd see an occasional sign of them. I mean, they had a DNA post up at one drainage I used to hunt a lot, and in a month they marked 26 grizzlies.
Wow.
And then another place I hunt out of Great Falls. Great Falls is 40 miles from the mountains. It's on but you have the river over there that comes out of Augusta, the Sun River that flows down and whatnot. They're now having, and halfway between the Bob Marshall and Great Falls, there's a towns of Fort Shaw and Sims. It last year in August, they had 18 different grizzlies all the way down there. This spring they had 3 grizzlies all the way to Great Falls. So they're leaving their mountains, they're coming down into the flats, and there's just getting to be more and more bears and more incidents. When I was young, I would cow call some and bugle some, generally to locate, but cow call sometimes to try to bring a bull in. But you'd always kind of get in, you'd get hidden, get in a deep, dark place, so the animal would have to come in close and whatnot to be there. And I've had too many friends that have cow called and bugled grizzlies in up there. So I don't do it at all now unless I can see 75 to 100 yards in all directions.
Really?
Because we have so many bears up there anymore. You just have to be careful.
Do you carry spray or sidearm or anything?
I carry spray.
Yeah.
I never used to carry anything. I mean, for 30 years hunting near West Yellowstone, I never carried anything. But now I carry spray. With a pistol, you have to get it out and you'd have to actually hit the animal.
Yeah. Yeah.
But with spray, all you really need to do is hit the trigger. And that stuff is so horrible, it will kind of deter things. Now, I've been fortunate. I've been treed by grizzlies up there twice, and I've never had to use it. But that was back when I could also climb a tree. Now I can't climb a tree anymore. So, and with being an old cripple that I am, people love hunting with me because they all know they can outrun me. And I kind of fit that bill.
A few years ago, I broke down and bought a can of spray because I'm the same way. I carry a pistol most of the time, but honestly, I carry it more for people. I don't expect to run into a bear, but I broke down and bought a can of spray a few years back, and I got up on top of this ridge. It was foggy. It was just perfect, and I do know there's some grizzly bears in the area, and it just dawned on me, like, here I am hunting, like everything's perfect, and it was a good stiff wind, and I thought, man, I pulled the trigger on this bad boy. It's just seasoning for the bear, so I've waffled back and forth on it.
Well, it's seasoning, but my son actually had a can go off accidentally in his truck.
Oh my gosh!
And he showed me the elk wallow he stripped down in and submerged himself in trying to wash it off because he said it was one of the worst moments of his life because it was not good.
Oh, that's funny. No, it could be really bad. Yeah, I got to back up a little bit though, talking about the endangered, the grizzly and the status that they have right now. It's frustrating because you would think the federal government would lean liberal, but the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service did remove them from the endangered species list at one time, in which lawsuits put them back on. So it is a little bit frustrating when the federal government's ready to remove them, and they're strong armed by. Don't go into that, but so many of these groups.
Well, what's frustrating on it is our legal system.
Yeah, I agree.
Because they need to have grizzlies released off the endangered because they're not endangered, and they need to put a little bit of respect into the bear. The bears know right now that they're safe. We're not going to do anything, and if they just had some respect, it would help. But what was it, 2 or 3 years ago? When the feds took them off the endangered, and Wyoming went to have the season, and right before the season, they got a federal judge in Florida to stop it. I mean, why can a federal judge that lives in a state that far away that has nothing to do be able to stop our hunting seasons here? Yeah. That was just asinine.
I didn't realize it was out of Florida, but same thing in Idaho. We had a tag. We had a winner drawn for that tag. But the season gets shut down, and you were preaching to the choir, but the North American model of conservation works. It's worked because we have all of this that we didn't even have before. I mean, moose, turkeys all across the West. I mean, there's all kinds of success stories, and in large part
because of hunters.
Exactly.
Because of this,
it's
not
so
because of the money the do-gooders have put out there. It's because of the money put in by hunting groups that want to see these animals and want to see them and want to see them propagate and get a good population so we can hunt them. But it's still money by hunters to bring these animals back.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. I mean, yeah, it's like talking to a 10-year-old.
Yep. One thing, you had talked with me earlier. You wanted to talk a little bit about the good old days, the 70s, the 80s, and whatnot. And to me, boy, the 70s the 70s, then the 90s were still good, but the 70s were so fantastic. And my part on this is just the monetary part of being able to go to Canada.
Yeah.
You asked me earlier about elk, and I loved hunting elk, but I fell in love with British Columbia, so I missed a lot of elk seasons because once again, you kind of hunt all animals at about the same time of year. And so for a lot of elk seasons, I was up in British Columbia hunting. But my first hunt in 76, I was up with Paul in British Columbia, and I shot a moose, caribou, and goat on that hunt. All three animals. Now, I booked a hunt for two animals. It was $1,500. And I got to shoot the goat for another 1,000. So I shot three species in 10 days for $2,500. The next year in 77, I hunted with Paul in that area that he was buying in the Yukon. And I had moose and caribou on that hunt for $2,500. And I shot the grizzly, and that cost me another 1,000. So I shot three animals for $3,500.
Man.
And in today's prices, a grizzly is 20,000, a Canadian moose is 25,000, a caribou is 8 or 10,000. So I mean, those same animals today cost you $50,000+ to shoot.
Yeah, it is. It is insane, and certainly, it's dream hunts that are now, way out of 95% of people's reach. But I did have a little experience. I worked in Alaska for an outfitter up there, and man, it's not.
Excuse me.
You're good. It's not the outfitter gouging people. I mean, just the amount of permits and the logistics and getting food in there. I mean, it's just it stacks up for sure.
Oh, it's the cost of everything.
Yeah.
I mean, flights into hunting areas now are more than are twice, double more than what I used to pay for the whole hunt.
Yeah.
And everything like that. So the costs, the costs are legit on a lot of the stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, compared to what it used to be years ago, I mean, it's a total different creature right now.
Well, that brings up go ahead. I'm sorry.
Nope, go ahead.
Well, that brings up a good point because 70s, I'm sure in the 80s and even into some of the 90s, it was an epic trip or a monumental trip for somebody to come from, say, Pennsylvania or Ohio to come out and elk hunt in the West. But now it's like an every year deal.
Yes.
People.
Yeah, it was unheard of in the earlier years, as you just said, because it was, just getting around, getting there, doing everything. It was a lot harder now with all the plane travel, with all this and with all that. I mean, you're there in half a day.
Yeah, yeah, and not just going blind with all the all the apps they have now, the Onyx Maps, the Google Earth, every department now has all the draw odds and they do all the work for you. So I mean, I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it is a different world now. People come out every year from the East and hunt. So yeah, it's a different world.
Right, but part of it is when you're back east, you have whitetail deer to hunt.
Yeah, yeah.
Unless you're lucky enough to draw a bear tag in some state.
Yeah.
To where, in Montana, we're so unbelievably fortunate here. I mean, we have 2 months a year where I cannot legally hunt something with a bow. I mean, June 15th to August 15th. Other than that, August 15th, antelope opens, and it goes right from one thing to another all the way through the spring bear that ends on June 15th.
I know it's the same way here in Idaho, and it's a problem getting my firewood in. It's a real,
but it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, it is. It is. I get worse at juggling it every year, though. I used to be pretty good about juggling my time, but anymore it's just in the woods. Backing up a little bit, for people that haven't, you talk about killing a grizzly at point blank range with an arrow. I've had the good fortune to see lots of big bears take bullets and arrows. Now, it is amazing. I mean, it gives you an appreciation for the killing power of a sharp broadhead through two lungs. I mean, they just get zipped, spin around, growl, and wha-bam. They're generally down pretty quick.
Right. Well, bears and cats have less blood per body weight than a deer and elk.
Oh, really?
So they bleed out quicker.
I never heard that.
And then when you just get to a bow, you shoot something with a gun and shock sets.
Yes.
And through my tree stand accident 25 years ago, I realized what you can do with shock. It's amazing. But with an arrow, shock doesn't set in, so the adrenaline factor and all that doesn't set in. So you just bleed freely and tip over. I mean, I can think of so many animals I've shot that didn't even know they were hit. Yeah. They run 20 or 30 yards and they turn around to look to go, what the hell just happened there? And then they tip over.
Yeah, because they're looking at the first two shots that missed. They don't see the third one coming.
There's been a few of those.
I can relate.
I think everybody can.
If they've done it any time at all, they can.
Yes.
Without sounding like a fool, which I'm pretty good at, what other kind of bears have you shot?
I've taken black bears.
Okay.
And then I've taken a polar bear.
There's the one. I didn't want to ask you, and you say no. Where'd you hear that? You shot a polar bear. What year are we talking?
That was 2005.
Wow. And
I had a fun year in 2005. I've hunted with this outfitter in Saskatchewan who knew a guy, had befriended a guy that had the polar bear area in the Northwest Territories. And so he actually brought that outfitter down to Bozeman, and I attended a little show he put on. And you could bring, for a long time, you hadn't been able to bring polar bears back. Then they opened it up for that short little period.
Yeah.
And that was that period. So I had always wanted, I love hunting bears and wanted to be there. So I booked a hunt with him in 2005. And that year, I shot a black bear with the outfitter from Saskatchewan I'd hunted with. I shot the grizzly in British Columbia, and I shot the polar bear.
Damn, I would say that's a very good year. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did the polar bear hunt go? Like, you guys on snow machines, or how'd that work?
Well, you get to the area you go to on snow machines. Now, first off, I flew to Yellowknife first, and then had to fly from Yellowknife to a little Eskimo village called Holmen of 400 people. And there was 100-degree temperature change from when we left Yellowknife to when we lit at Holmen. And we're in Holmen, and then we took a day ride on snow machines, a long day ride to get to where we were going to hunt polar bears. But then once there, you cannot hunt polar bears under fair chase off a snow machine. You have to do the dog sled thing.
Mm-hmm.
So which was kind of funny about this. You're on a dog sled, and then the assistant guide is on a snow machine following you behind, pulling the toboggan with all your supplies and all the everything. And we left the little. We didn't build an igloo. They had a little plywood hut thing built, let's say 12 by 14, that the four of us slept in. See, I ended up when I got up there, I was supposed to go to a different area, And they just had a hunter come back from there that had not seen a bear track or a bear in 15 days.
Oh, that had to be
So
disheartening.
we went, well, they don't want to send you that way. So they sent me to close to where the open water was. You're just on top of the frozen ocean, but close to where the open water was, because that's where the seals are. And they'd killed 3 or 4 good bears out of there already that year. But, and this is a mindset that I got in, which was wrong. And in essence, you go, God, if they kill 3, 4 good bears, what's left?
Mm.
Well, polar bears have a range of, let's say, a few thousand miles. They're always moving. So you shouldn't have a mindset, if the big one's gone, there won't be another big one, because polar bears are just constantly moving. And I was there during the breeding season when the boars are out covering country looking for females. But we got to this little wood shack. We stayed there overnight. Then we went out in the morning, and there was another hunter with us, and he was actually the one supposed to be in the area. And he went right down along the water. And then we were more, I say inland, we were farther away from the water, but on the open ocean. And you're just traveling, going along. You're looking for bears, or you're looking for tracks to follow up a track or whatnot. And we hadn't been very long into the chase, and here comes the other guide and hunter, and they've turned 2 dogs out, and they're chasing a polar bear, and they go right by us at about 100 yards. And it's just a medium-sized polar bear. And we get to watch them do it. Why they even turned out, I don't know, but they chased it more inland. So we turned and we went towards the water then. So we're basically, let's say, on the best spot. And we're going along the water, and then they're farther inland going along because they didn't shoot that bear. And then my assistant guide, sees a polar bear way out there, way inland. So we turn and we go inland, and we go out there, and we get up towards this bear, and it's a little bear, not anything you'd be interested in.
Now, when you say little, put that in perspective. How many
little bear? Let's say it's a 6 foot bear.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not a big bear. And when we turn and go in like that, then the other guys come from in there, and they go back to the edge of the water where you would think the bear is being closer to water because that's where the seals are. And meanwhile, while we're doing all this, we come upon a polar bear carcass, a big carcass that's been skinned. So we found where one of their previous hunts, somebody had killed a polar bear. And so we're now inside, and the other guys are along the open water. Well, and we can't, they're not close enough. We can see them. We intermittently would see them or just catch a glimpse of them or something. Let's say we're a half to a mile away from each other. And we're going along, and a few hours later, all of a sudden we see them just standing on top of this little pinnacle ice out there and whatnot. And we kind of glass over there, and they're just standing there. They're off the snow machine and that. We go, don't know what's going on, but we just keep going. And we're going along, and hour later, we see this polar bear. We get in on it, and my old guide, who's 65 to 70 years old, and because up there Eskimos respect their elders.
Yeah.
And you have to be about 60 to become a head guide. And so he's there, and then I have the young assistant guide. Well, I ask him how good a bear it is. I'm looking at my 3rd polar bear, and he goes, our last hunt, we killed a 9.5 footer. We hunted for 10 days. Finally got this, killed a 9.5 footer. He says, this is a better bear. This is a bigger bear. This is yada, yada. And I went, well, that's what I'm looking for. So, I'd want, everybody comes up with the thing. I want a 10 footer type thing or whatnot. But I'm thinking, they killed 4 bears out of here. What's the chances of finding another 5th bigger bear? So, and this was a very nice bear. So I go, let's go for it. And especially after he tells me the size it was. And so how you hunt them out there is, it's just basically really flat ice with just very, you've seen some pictures where they show the real rugged ice and the ice hills where pressure ridges have pushed up. We had none of that. It's just basically flat forever. So they turned a couple of dogs out. They turned a couple of huskies out of the box on your dog team to chase them. And the dogs get in there and chase them. And we followed it for a mile and a half, 2 miles. And finally the polar bear bayed up. And, get out with my bow and we're walking in towards it. And the bears just stopped there, and got the 2 or 3 dogs around it. And once again, I mentioned earlier, I want to be close. I get moving in on this polar bear, and all of a sudden the guides start screaming, stop, don't get so close, he's going to charge. And them yelling that actually scared the bear, and he kind of took off again. So we followed up. I was like 40 yards away, but that 40 yards isn't what I wanted to be. I wanted to be 20 or less. And so we get back in the dog sled, and we followed up for another half a mile. And right then they had the polar bear. There was a little pinnacle ice thing sticking up, and the dogs and the polar bear were on one side of that. And I got off. The dogs had it bayed up again. I got off the sled, the dog sled thing, and was working into it. And all of a sudden the bear kind of started to move, and it went to go around that little pinnacle ice. Well, I moved around the other side, and then the bear turned and walked right into me at under 20 yards. So it worked out perfect. And then I had the 2 dogs around it, and then all of a sudden the dogs cleared, and I was, and I had the 2 Eskimos are behind me. The guy and the assistant guide are behind me with their guns backing me up. Now, the funny part on this is the guns they're backing me up with are 223. That's a gopher gun. But
yeah, but they don't know it.
Well, there's no such thing as ethics in hunting or fair chase in hunting with an Eskimo. First off, 223 is military brass, so it's cheap. And everything up in Eskimoville is expensive.
Yeah.
So they buy these cheap bullets because to them, when they hunt a polar bear, they drive up to it on a snowmobile, let's say at 100 yards. They pop it, and then they drive away and watch the bear and wait for the bear to die. If you shoot something with a 22 in the lungs or you shoot it with a 458 just kills it a lot quicker. The 22 is still going to kill it. It's just going to take time. And they're not into fair chase. They're just into survival. And that's how they hunt. So a 223 was the standard gun. There was one big gun in the town of Holman, and that was a 22-250. That still isn't a big gun. But I can care about having a backup. I've never thought twice about a backup because it's just something you don't think about. But, I got in on this bear. This bear came around, and I shot. And Eskimos have a tendency to be trigger happy. So I turned around immediately to him and went, "Don't shoot, it's dead." And it made it about 40 yards and tipped over. And so we got the bear all taken care of and yada, yada, yada. And it's a nice foot. It's a 9-foot polar bear.
Oh, nice.
It's a very nice bear. I mean, I'm super happy with it. Everything was great. It was a first day bear, but I've never, I've killed, the black bear I killed that year was a first day bear. And the big grizzly I killed on 9/11 was a first day bear. So I've never had problems shooting something on the first day. But we turn and we go back to the little place we slept, the plywood shack. We get back there and the other guys are there. And they had killed a polar bear also. And when we had seen him stopped, as I mentioned earlier, when we just happened to see him stopped sitting on this ice, they had just shot a bear right there. We didn't know it. The guy shot it with a rifle, and it took 3 shots. And if I would have been fortunate enough to still been close to the water, if we hadn't chased that little bear, went inland, if I'd have been close to the water, if I'd have shot that polar bear, it still would be a world record today.
No kidding.
So we zigged when we shouldn't have. So this guy got to shoot a hell of a bear, and skull was the same length, but it was 2 inches wider than mine. Just a big old bear.
Yeah.
So
and again, like
but,
you just pointed out something we had talked about earlier. You know, you zip these things with an arrow, and they expire pretty quick. You hit them with a gun, man. The fight is on.
yeah, it took him 3 shots with I think a 375, and I was able to do it with 1 arrow. So you just proper placement. Once again, they just bleed out quicker.
You have that thing as a rug. You didn't full mount it, did you?
I full mounted it.
Wow.
I'm sitting in my house right now. I've got 2 black bears full mounted, the polar bear full mounted, and the grizzly full mounted. And I shot a beautiful, beautiful honey-colored cinnamon bear 3 years ago in Saskatchewan that's in the process of getting life mounted.
Now, is that polar bear standing or on all fours? Or?
No, I've got them on. Well, each one of these mounts, they're, let's say, walking slightly tilted up with 1 foot off the ground.
Yeah.
They're all 4 of them are the same mount. I love this mount, but no, they're not standing up.
Their pad end up looking similar to a grizzly that size or a brown bear that size, or are they a little bit bigger because of the snow? Are they designed a little different?
You don't have that much snow, but no, I've never brown bear hunted, so
yeah.
So I can't compare it to that. But they're, I mean, I've seen big grizzly tracks in Montana, and they're like a big grizzly.
Yeah, so you can kind of gauge their size by the track, measuring a track. You can kind of gauge their square footage.
Yes.
Yeah, gotcha,
Yes.
gotcha.
But they're a little bit bigger because their pad is hair.
Yeah.
It's not calloused. They're kind of like a lynx. They have the hair on their feet. And what's really neat about a polar bear is they're up there where it's really, really cold, and their hair is way shorter than the grizzly or black bear hair.
Interesting.
But their skin underneath is black.
Interesting.
Kind of like black absorbs heat, this and that, but their hair is way shorter than the grizzly or the black bear. But the hunt for them, to me, excitement wise, it was the grizzlies way outdo it.
Yeah,
it's way more fun because I have mountain lion dogs. I run cats all the time, and you're shooting something out of a tree. The whole fun of the whole thing is the chase. When you shoot it, it's kind of anticlimactical. And the polar bear is somewhat that too. The fun was in the chase, the country you're seeing, everything.
Yeah.
But the grizzly bear, when you're in that big blueberry patch and you're sneaking in on them or sneaking in, you get so whatever, and then they move into you. It's way more hunt. I enjoy grizzly hunting way more than the polar bear hunt.
Yeah, but like you say, the being in a totally different environment, and interacting with the natives up there, and I mean that adds so much to it. It's the whole experience.
Oh, and that's exactly it. I mean, they were the friendliest people I've ever been around in my life.
Really?
In that little, and the story of this was unreal about it. I mean, they're the friendliest people I've ever been around. If one of them if I'd go into a business with one of them, say you see one of the other people there, they introduce you to them. There they take you around and take you to each cubicle, and you get introduced to everybody in the place. And when you were walking down the street, they all say hi. They expect you to say hi back. Friendly beyond belief. And then I met there were a couple of lady police officers there, and one of them was flying out. When I'm flying out, I look at them, I say, you guys have got to have the most boring job in the whole world. I said, I've never been around such a nice group of people ever in my life. I said, friendly beyond belief and just polite and nice. I went, and the town of Holman had 400 people in it. I went, how many arrests do you make here a year? And the gal looks at me and goes, 500. And I about fell over. I went, what? alcohol and
Yeah.
domestic abuse.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
So, which was really sad. I didn't get to witness any of that, but I mean, what would you average? 1.25 arrests per person a year. A little bit out of my league.
Yeah. It's probably 12, the same 12 though. 12
well, it could be. But the gals, these two gals were at the airport when I flew in, and I wondered what are two cops doing here at the airport, and they were there to see what was coming in for booze.
Oh,
so
yes.
They know where the party is.
Yeah.
But it was fun culturally, because one day after I shot the polar bear, we go up to this lake to go ice fishing, and just to see part of their culture and what they're doing, and it's 30 below. We snow machine up to this lake. The guy's got to stand on a snowmobile to hold the ice auger high enough to drill a hole, because he probably had to drill through 6 feet of ice.
Wow.
To get down to the water. We didn't catch any fish, but we're coming out of there that afternoon, and we run into this family, this Eskimo husband and wife, and they got 2 little girls with them, let's say 5, 6 years old, dressed up in their fur suits and whatnot, just Eskimo clothing. And we go, "What are you doing?" And they're going, "Well, it's a 3-day weekend holiday. We're heading into the lake up here and going camping."
Oh my gosh.
How many couples do you know in Montana, when it's 30 below, hop on a snowmobile and a toboggan and go camping for the weekend?
So, not any sane ones.
Yeah. Well, when the guys picked me up at the airport, it's 25 below out. They ride up in the snow machines. They've got baseball caps on, a light jacket, and leather gloves.
Yeah.
And I'm later looking at one of them and go, "Does it get very warm here in the summer?" And one guy goes, "Oh, it gets unbelievably hot." That doesn't tell you anything. I go, "Does it get very warm here in the summer?" And he goes, "Oh, it gets unreal hot." And I said, "Give me a temperature." And he says, "Sometimes it gets up to 60 degrees." And that was unbelievably hot to them.
Yeah.
So it's what you get acclimated to and everything. So it was a fun learning trip.
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah. To me, that's a huge part of out of state, or, when you go and travel to hunt. I really, really enjoy meeting the people and the whole thing. Yeah. It's a big part of it.
Exactly. The culture that you'll never be around again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how they exist.
Yeah. And what other quote unquote vehicle would get you up there, right? Nobody's just going to go up there as a tourist. It's
a what?
Nobody's going to go up there just as a tourist.
They do like crazy.
Do they really?
And it was unreal to find out about it. It's the Japanese that go up there. On our airlines today, you're lucky. I mean, if they'll give you a glass of water and a cookie, that's about maybe what you can get for nothing. To where, when you used to fly, you got snacks, you got this and that. The airline I flew up to there was a Japanese-owned airline, and I mean, on the menu as we were flying, there was Chilean sea bass or filet mignon. But what it is the Northern Lights are sacred to the Japanese.
Ooh.
So they have unbelievable amount of flights on good airlines that go up there, because I have never experienced Aurora Borealis like I did up there. I mean, they talk about the dancing of the Northern Lights and whatnot. I mean, it was tenfold what I've ever seen in the States or in British Columbia. Absolutely unbelievable. So they get a big Japanese trade of people coming over to see that.
Dancing for sure. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
It was fun.
Yeah, it looks it. Well, man, we've been on here for an hour and 30.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I know it. It's funny because I get people on here and like, hey, you know, you want to come on a podcast? Well, how long is it? I don't know if I can talk for an hour. I said, trust me, you get going. It just kind of goes.
Yes.
Man, I hope I run into you down in Lolo.
Well, I hope we can see you there also. And if you ever want any other hunting stories on some of the, now, when you talked to my son, what'd you talk about? Did you talk about mule deer, whitetails, or when he hunted Canadian moose?
Mule deer, mostly.
Okay, well, he's awfully good at that.
Yeah, he looks
you know,
it.
if you ever want to, I ended up finding a really good Canadian moose spot, and right at the top of British Columbia. You know, you go across the border and you're into the Alaskan Yukon.
Yeah.
But Randy Lillenquist shot his world record, number 2 in the world there. My son shot a 201-inch bull. I shot a 200-inch bull. I think there's four bulls in the top 10 of Pope and Young taken out of this one guy's area. So found a really good place on moose and whatnot. So if you ever want to talk about moose or stuff like that, that's one of my other favorite animals to hunt.
Yep, I guarantee you, I'm going to get you back on and talk about that.
And my son did really well. He was up there 2 years and shot two really nice bulls up there.
Well, if you're down at Lolo, you're not going to be at 6'8". You're not going to be tough to pick out of the crowd.
Well, I'm not that anymore.
What, 6'7"?
No, I'm 6'6", and I'm easy to spot. I walk with a definite limp and whatnot, and a walking stick. I don't know if Brian told you about me at all, but 25 years ago, I had a tree stand come out of a tree.
Yeah, he actually did.
Shattered my pelvis in over 20 pieces, and 15 operations later, still going. So no complaints.
You do sound like the guy to hunt with in bear country.
Yeah, well, that's why everybody says that. With my step limp and I can't do much, everybody goes, we want to go with you. You're walking bait.
That's good stuff. Hey, sure do appreciate your time, Scott.
Okay, thank you very much, and hopefully we will see you at Lolo.
Sounds good, bud. Take care.
Okay, you bet. See you, Rob.